In 1945, the Philippine capital became a battlefield where every street, every home became a front line between liberation and devastation. What was once the crown jewel of Asia turned into a furnace of fire and blood. By the time the smoke cleared, over 100,000 civilians were gone, and one of the world's most beautiful cities was left in devastation. Manila was not just liberated, it was sacrificed. This is the story of how a city was turned into a graveyard of its own people. By the closing months of 1944, the Pacific War was entering its final, decisive phase. The Philippines was more than another battleground. It was the key to Japan's doorstep. Whoever controlled its ports and skies would control the final stage of the Pacific War. For General Douglas MacArthur, the campaign was more than a military objective. Forced to leave the Philippines in 1942, he had sworn to come back, and now, as American troops advanced across the Pacific, that commitment was near. His goal was to retake Manila as quickly as possible, liberate thousands of prisoners held by the Japanese, and restore the authority of the Philippine government in exile. But within his own command, not everyone agreed with his approach. General Walter Kruger, head of the Sixth Army, advised caution. He urged to strengthen his forces first, fearing that Japanese troops hidden in the mountains might strike from behind. MacArthur disagreed. He said that every day of delay would risk the lives of prisoners and give more time to the enemy to destroy Manila. So he commanded his men to advance without any delay. On the other side, the Japanese command was also divided. General Tomoyuki Yamashita, commander of Japan's troops in the Philippines, saw no point in defending Manila. To him, it was already a lost city. His strategy was to retreat northward and wage guerrilla war from the mountains, but his orders were defied. Vice Admiral Denshichi Okuchi commanded Rear Admiral Sanji Iwabuchi to hold Manila at all costs. Iwabuchi gathered approximately 17,000 defenders, including sailors, marines, mechanics, and local auxiliaries, and resolved to fight to the death. Many lacked rifles, depending on machine guns taken from wrecked aircraft, improvised bombs, and makeshift spears. When MacArthur's troops finally moved forward at the end of January 1945, they were not heading towards an easy liberation, but into a city already doomed by pride, revenge, and hopelessness. MacArthur gave his forces three urgent objectives: rescue internees at Santo Tomas University, take Malacanang Palace, and the Legislative Building. On the night of 3rd February, the soldiers of the 8th Cavalry Regiment broke through the gates of Santo Tomas University. The guards on duty, mostly Taiwanese, offered little resistance inside. Almost 3,500 prisoners, American, British, and Dutch civilians interned since 1942, burst into tears, embracing their liberators. But not all were free. 63 Japanese soldiers still held 275 hostages inside the main school building. Negotiations continued until February 5th before the last prisoner was freed. But afterwards, the US troops faced a new crisis of feeding thousands of weak and starving internees. Meanwhile, Japanese engineers demolished the Novolichi Bridge, cutting off supply lines and forcing the 1st Cavalry Division to conserve food and ammunition until the 37th Infantry Division carved a relief corridor. As the 37th Division pushed through the northern districts, they reached the old Bilibid prison and discovered over 1,000 abandoned captives, including American POWs and Filipino civilians. Fires raged, mines exploded, and machine gun fire echoed through the narrow streets. The Japanese had turned each alley into a trap. Barbed wire, hidden bombs, and fuel depots set to blow. As American soldiers attempted to cross the Estero de la Reina bridge, they encountered a storm of bullets. Still, they advanced, establishing a fragile bridgehead near Malacanang Gardens. Engineers quickly constructed a pontoon bridge, only for it to be swarmed by panicked civilians fleeing the combat. South of the river, the battle became even more gruesome. Industrial zones turned into fortresses like the Provisor Island power plant, where 2 full days of fighting resulted in 25 American fatalities. On February 10th, MacArthur lifted restrictions on artillery. From then on, 105 and 155mm artillery Tanks and flamethrowers smashed walls before the infantry stormed in. Each building became a battlefield, with every victory paid in blood and fire. As the 37th Infantry battled building to building in northern Manila, the 1st Cavalry Division began a sweeping encirclement of the city. On February 8th, the 5th and 8th Cavalry Regiments crossed the river east and south of the city. The 8th took the shorter route, but the 5th looped wide through the town. After scattered skirmishes, they captured the Makati power station on February 10th. By February 12th, both regiments had reached the coast, sealing the ring. As they turned north along the bay, they met with fierce Japanese resistance at Harrison Park, Rosal Stadium, and LaSalle University. The enemy had turned the baseball field and campus structures into fortified positions. The Americans responded with tanks, flamethrowers, and explosives, every attack resulting in smoldering ruins. On February 16th, the 1st Cavalry Brigade, comprising the 5th and 12th Regiments, was redirected to support the 37th Division in the downtown fighting. Their progress towards the Manila Hotel and the High Commissioner's residence saw fierce combat from room to room. By February 19th, the northern half of Manila was firmly under American control. The 5th Cavalry relieved the exhausted 148th Regiment and attacked the University of the Philippines Hospital, which the Japanese had fortified with overlapping fire positions from the basements to the rooftops. After days of brutal fighting, only 75 of the 250 defenders remained who took their own lives following their defeat. Over 7,000 civilians trapped inside were finally released. As the outer defenses fell, the remaining Japanese retreated behind the historic walls of Intramuros. For an entire week, the American artillery relentlessly bombarded the fortress. On February 23rd, after over 7,000 shells shattered the stone walls, the U.S. infantry surged in from every corner. The walled city burned as Fort Santiago fell, its tunnels cleared with fire and grenades. On February 26th, Rear Admiral Iwabuchi chose suicide over surrender. The legislative, finance, and agriculture building soon turned to rubble in the final merciless fight for Manila. Anticipating a southern assault, Iwabuchi had transformed Manila's government district into a fortress. Machine guns at every window, sandbagged basements, and fortified bunkers. On February 25th, the American artillery began firing, but miscalculations caused shells to fall near friendly lines, forcing a brief pause. When the barrage resumed, the 148th Regiment charged towards the legislative building, only to face grenades thrown through shattered floors. After an additional 3 days of bombardment and intense combat, they finally secured it on February 28th. Nearby, the 5th Cavalry's advance on the agriculture building met with a storm of gunfire. Tanks, flamethrowers, and phosphorus grenades blasted through the lower floors, setting the stronghold ablaze. The defenders refused to surrender. By March 1st, U.S. troops turned the building into debris. The finance building collapsed 2 days later, following a last intense effort. On March 3rd, all organized Japanese resistance had ended. The Battle of Manila was over, but victory came at an unspeakable cost. In their desperation, Japanese troops unleashed terror upon the civilians, massacring families, burning districts like Tondo and Paco, and committing horrific atrocities in churches and schools. Tens of thousands lost their lives during the days of unrestrained violence. American shelling, though intended for liberation, also ravaged the ancient walled city of Intramuros, destroying centuries of heritage. By the time the smoke cleared, over 100,000 civilians were dead. The Japanese forces were completely destroyed. American casualties surpassed 6,000. Manila's infrastructure was devastated. Water and electricity systems were ruined. Hospitals and universities were all reduced to ash. The Battle of Manila demonstrated the power of modern warfare and its cost. When the guns fell silent, only ruins and grief remained, marking the city as one of World War II's greatest tragedies. Manila's ruins tell a story of courage, cruelty, and loss. What lesson do you think history left us that day? Comment below, and if you want more forgotten chapters of World War II, don't forget to like and subscribe.